We're going to assume that everyone listening tonight believes that there is a God. So if we believe that there is a God, we should be asking the question, does he have a plan and purpose with the earth and with mankind? And if so, what is his message to us about that? We believe that the Bible tells us that God has a plan and purpose with the earth and with mankind, and that it is highlighted in many passages like this one in Numbers 14, verse 21. But as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. If you were with us this morning for our memorial service, we looked at Numbers chapter 13 and 14 and saw how the children of Israel were rejected by God because of their lack of faith and rebellion. They were not permitted to enter the promised land because of unbelief. We often forget or overlook the fact that this cornerstone verse in the Bible comes in the middle of these circumstances. And I think that God is highlighting the fact that his plan will not be thwarted because of man's disobedience. He is reminding us and everyone who is reading that his purpose with the earth and with mankind will be accomplished no matter what. His will be done on earth as it is done in heaven. So we need to ask ourselves, is the world filled with God's glory right now? Has it ever been? Or is this verse talking about something that will happen in the future? So let's consider the world today. Currently, the world is in the middle of a great pandemic, COVID-19, with over 41 million cases and 1 million deaths worldwide in under a year. Every single one of us has been affected by it in our day-to-day lives. There's no end in sight without a vaccine, and that doesn't even seem to be on the near horizon. Climate change. Climate change is a real problem and threat to our planet. Mostly driven by human emissions of greenhouse gases, we have seen large-scale shifts in weather patterns. Glaciers have shrunk, ice on rivers and lakes is breaking up earlier or not forming at all. Plant and animal ranges have shifted, and trees are flowering sooner. Effects that scientists had predicted in the past would result from global climate change are now occurring. Loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, and longer, more intense heat waves. Air pollution. Another consequence to human emissions is air pollution. The World Health Organization estimates that 4.2 million people die every year as a result of exposure to outside air pollution. Water pollution. Every year, man dumps 8.3 million tons of plastic into the ocean, resulting in the death of millions of marine animals every year. The largest trash site on the planet is in the Pacific Ocean, and it is called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is so big, it covers twice the surface area of Texas. Around the globe, 500 marine locations are now recorded as dead zones globally, covering an area roughly the size of the United Kingdom. In these locations, the water is so badly polluted, no life can exist there. Poverty. Over the past 100 years, great efforts have been made to reduce poverty in the world. But even today, 10% of the world's population is struggling to survive on less than $2 a day. Of the world's 28 poorest countries, 27 of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, all with poverty rates above 30%. Meanwhile, the wealthiest 1% of the population in the world controls 46% of the world's wealth. Violence and conflict. Even though there are statistics to show that the world is becoming less violent, the world is still incredibly impacted by violence and conflict throughout the world. It just has become more fragmented to local regions instead of worldwide conflicts. Just look at this chart, which is looking at the number of people in the world who have been forcibly displaced in the year 2019. 79 million people have been forcibly displaced. So what that means is that they've had to leave their home because of conflict. And some may not have had to leave and go to different countries, but some have. And that's what the refugee number is there. 26 million refugees in the year 2019. And we've seen the pictures in the news of people, at great peril, taking great risk to flee their home countries just to find a better life. It truly, truly is sad. But so many, many people are affected by conflict in the world. Just look at this quote from the United Nations. It says, globally, the absolute number of war deaths has been declining since 1946, and yet conflict and violence are on the rise, with many conflicts today waged between non-state actors such as political militias, criminal and international terrorist groups. Unresolved regional tensions, a breakdown in the rule of law, absent or co-opted state institutions, illicit economic gain, and the scarcity of resources, exacerbated by climate change, have become dominant drivers of conflict. In 2016, more countries experienced violent conflict than at any point in almost 30 years. At the same time, conflicts are becoming more fragmented. Crime. Another quote from the UN about crime. Today, crime kills far more people than armed conflicts. In 2017, almost 500,000 people across the world were killed in homicides, far surpassing the 89,000 people killed in active armed conflicts and the 19,000 killed in terrorist attacks. So we can see crime is a huge problem in the world. In 2020, we have seen a number of cities in North America affected by large-scale civil unrest due to racial injustice, police brutality, and inequality. World leaders. We have seen shocking examples of political leaders over the past decade. Really, the political environment in the United States on every level is a case study in human nature and leaves a lot to be desired. But even here in Canada, our leaders and politicians seem to be constantly moving from scandal to scandal, and many times seem to only have their own interests in mind. The Bible tells us that God is in control of the nations and who is in power. So we have to trust that He is working out His plan and purpose with this too. We're reminded of this in Daniel chapter 4. The Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever He will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. So in this regard too, God is working about His plan and purpose with the earth and with mankind. All of these issues we have briefly looked at show us that right now the earth is filled with problems. Problems that we continually struggle with, and they have no real resolutions in sight. The greatest problem, in my opinion, is death. And every single human is heading this way. It's inescapable, it's unavoidable, and the reason why it is so important to have a faith that makes sense. Because as we know, that nothing in this life lasts forever. Unfortunately, we live in a world where Christianity is being diminished. God is being diminished. And great efforts are underway to remove God from schools, institutions, and society in general. The National Trust for Canada estimated back in 2019 that a third of Canada's Christian architecture, some 9,000 churches, will close in the next 10 years. Christians have turned from God, and are caught up in the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. Human rights have helped in many ways in our society, but recently we have seen cases where human rights tribunals have actually overruled a group's right to religious beliefs and freedoms. This is extremely worrisome as Bible students who currently are able to meet freely and choose what we believe. Humanism is increasing, and man is elevating himself to a higher position than God. And God's word is not even taken into account anymore. Even so-called Christians seem to be completely unaware of what God says is right and wrong. Just look at these surveys. Here's a survey from 2005 to 2016, and it shows the amount of people who say that they believe in God. So it's very much in decline. 81% in 2005, 65% in 2016. Likewise, this question was posed on the survey. My religious beliefs are very important to me. In the year 2000, it was around 70%, and it's very much on the decline, down to 49% in the year 2017. This is probably no surprise to any of us. In fact, some of us probably would think that these numbers would be much, much lower. It's easy to see that the trajectory of man heading farther and farther away from God. And God, who has a plan and purpose for the earth, at some point will intervene. Simple reading of Scripture reveals that the intervention will be Jesus returning to the earth to establish a kingdom in Jerusalem, which all the nations of the world will be subject to. The Bible gives a strong warning from another time period in history where God did intervene. He intervened to stop the wicked activity of men, which was filling the earth with the things that he hated. And we find this in the story of Noah back in Genesis. And we'll read what was happening in that time in Genesis chapter 6, starting at verse 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made him. Now that there sounds a lot like today, doesn't it? That every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Skipping down to verse 11. The earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. We know what happens to the rest of the story. God sends a flood and destroys the earth, but saves Noah and his family through the ark. But just look at this language here as God describes the earth at this time. And what is filling the earth here? It's being filled with man's wickedness, and explicitly spoken about here as violence. People were filling the earth with violence, and God had enough of it and intervened. We're warned about this also in Matthew chapter 24, to take heed. But of the day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So here we can see Jesus' words. He's warning us that his return back to the earth will be just like it was in the days of Noah. Life was carrying on the earth. People thought nothing was going to happen, and then all of a sudden the flood came. So the warning is there to us and to mankind that he will come much in the same way. Now we want to look at a prophecy that happened roughly 500 years before Christ. It's an incredible prophecy in the Old Testament. It's talking about God's plan and purpose and Christ's return. We don't have time to go into great detail about it, but basically the prophet Daniel is in captivity in Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. In his dream, he sees an image of a man, and it has different sections to it, which represents the kingdoms and nations of men, starting with the Babylonians, and comes all the way down through history to present time. The dream is explained to him by the prophet Daniel in Daniel chapter 2. What I would like to look at tonight is the language here in this prophecy and see how this ties into our topic tonight in relation to God's plan and purpose. We'll pick up reading Daniel chapter 2, verse 34, where we read, "Thou sawest still that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces." So part of this dream that Nebuchadnezzar saw was this image standing, and it was an image of a man, representing, as we said, the nations of the world empires. But it doesn't last forever. And a rock comes and hits that image and destroys it. This also is explained to us later on in Daniel chapter 2, verse 34. "Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." Now, I would suggest to you that this is speaking about Jesus returning to the earth. Jesus is the stone that comes and smites the image and becomes a great mountain and then fills the whole earth. And we can see how this dovetails nicely into the other passages that we have looked at about God's plan and purpose, that it will fill the whole earth. It's not going to be just in Israel or in some remote area. It will fill the whole earth. And all those nations that, looked so great and so strong and so mighty, what does it tell us about them in Daniel chapter 2? They become like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carries them away, that no place was found for them. They will be gone. Later on in Daniel chapter 2, in verse 44, we read, "In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." So here we see language that, it's not language that we think about in the world today, like things lasting forever, nations lasting forever, or people, living forever. These are characteristics of the kingdom. We are told on numerous occasions that the return of Christ will be like a stone smashing the earth and will be felt worldwide. Here in Matthew 24, Jesus says, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." So once again, Jesus physically returning to the earth, and all the nations of the world being made subject to him. The Bible doesn't stop there. We're told in many places what will happen after Christ's return and the changes that will take place with Christ reigning from Zion. Let's look at these passages. We're going to look at one from Revelation, one from Micah, and one from Isaiah as we close our lecture tonight. What we want to do is think about all the things that are happening in the world today, see the resolutions that are spoken about in these passages that will be brought about in God's kingdom. Revelation 21, verses 1 to 4. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And think about, all those refugees, all the poor people in the world who experience sorrow and crying and pain and even death. We all are going to experience that in our lives through the loss of loved ones. And we ourselves someday, if Christ doesn't return, will face that as well. I'd like to look at Micah chapter 4 and read verses 1 to 5. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills. People shall flow into it. And many nations shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But they shall sit, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken it. For all people will walk, every one of them, in the name of his God. And we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. So think about this passage in terms of all the violence and conflicts that are going on in the world today. In the kingdom, they will beat their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, and they won't learn war anymore. And every man will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. We may not experience some of these things, but, look around the world and we can see that millions of people are affected and living in very, very difficult circumstances. But in the kingdom, every man will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. Lastly, I'd like to look at Isaiah chapter 11. We'll read here verses 1 to 9. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. Think about this passage in terms of, all of our world leaders. Jesus's reign is not going to be like that. He will not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears, but he will judge righteous judgment from Zion. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Again, complete contrast to the leaders of our world today. And finally, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. And I submit to you that that is the plan and purpose with the earth and with mankind for God. There will be a day where the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. May it be our prayer and petition that we all are participants in that time through God's mercy and grace.